Dispatch said that he couldn't wake them up.
It was an absolute horrific scene inside the Clancy home on January 24th, 2023. 3 children in the basement strangled with exercise ropes. Their mother, Lindsay, bloodied and paralyzed in the backyard. But this wasn't a home invasion. It wasn't a stranger who committed these acts. It was Lindsay.
3 children dead in the basement. Their mother bloodied and paralyzed in the backyard. The 911 call said he couldn't wake them up. But when investigators arrived, they found something the dispatch operator never could have imagined. This wasn't a home invasion. It wasn't a stranger. It was Lindsay. And the only question left is whether she's a killer or a victim of the very people who were supposed to help her. Picture a courtroom where everyone agrees on what happened, but no one can agree on why. That's the problem at the heart of this case. It's like a photograph developing in reverse. The more light you shine on it, the darker the image becomes. Because here you have a mother who admits she strangled her 3 children with exercise ropes. She doesn't deny it. She can't. But she claims she's not criminally responsible because of her mental illness and the medications she was prescribed.
Lindsay. She admits she did it, but claims she's not criminally responsible because of her mental illness and medications. And the defense is pointing the finger.
And the defense is pointing the finger at her mental health providers. Before we go deeper into what the evidence actually shows, make sure you're subscribed to Shadow Jury Archives. Because we don't just cover the story, we follow the facts. Now think about this. Lindsay Clancy was sitting in court in a wheelchair, facing 3 counts of murder and a life behind bars. But the question the jury has to answer is not whether she did it. Everyone agrees she did. The question is whether she could control it. The prosecution says she's an evil sociopathic killer.
The prosecution versus the defense, both agreeing that Lindsay Clancy did this, but disagreeing about why she did it. So ultimately, the question for this jury will be, is Lindsay Clancy an evil sociopathic killer, or is she?
The defense says she's the victim of a wrongful prosecution, a woman failed by the very system designed to help her. And at the center of it all is a single explosive allegation that the psychiatrist hired by the defense went into Lindsay's hospital room shortly after the killings and told her exactly what to say.
You know that nobody could get access to Lindsay Clancy in that hospital, and I mean nobody, right?
Correct.
And this went on for day after day after day, to your knowledge, facilitating, right?
Correct.
Her parents couldn't get in to see her, correct?
I don't believe so.
The first time Lindsay mentioned hearing voices was in a phone call to her husband from that hospital room.
Lindsay called Patrick and said, I heard voices in my head. Because remember, that's a significant part of this. This is the first time she's talking about voices.
That's significant, because before that call, there's no record of her talking about voices, no mention of auditory hallucinations, no documented psychosis, just a woman struggling with anxiety, depression, and passive suicidal thoughts. She told her nurse practitioner she felt numb. She told her counselor she couldn't sleep. She told anyone who would listen that something was wrong. But the voices, those came later. And the defense wants you to believe they were always there. The prosecution wants you to believe they were planted.
Hired by the defense went into that room almost, shortly after the killings and told Lindsay Clancy, told her to call her husband and say that she heard voices, that there were voices in her head telling her to do it.
That's the allegation. And it's a doozy. The prosecution's theory is that Dr. Paul Zazelle, the psychiatrist who visited Lindsay in the hospital under a court order, told her to call her husband and say she heard voices in her head.
Right?
Yes.
And they basically had a theory that they wanted to run with, that Zazelle told her, Lindsay, to say that she heard voices, right?
I don't know.
That she was being fed a script to make her defense look better. The problem is, no one knows what happened in that room. The door was closed. The trooper stationed outside didn't eavesdrop. He didn't hear the conversation. And when the lead investigator, Sergeant McKelligan, was asked about the basis for this theory.
Okay. And there's no investigator basis for that. That's McKelligan's speculation. Is that correct?
Correct.
Ooh, that's not good. That's not good. He's going to use that later in his closing argument. Trust me. That's going to be a big theme here about speculation versus evidence.
He admitted something crucial. There was no investigative basis for it. It was speculation.
That makes prosecutors not look so great, right? This is a theory not really based on evidence, but some circumstances, and you're presuming the worst, that the defense is making up a defense, that Lindsay's being fed a script and being...
Speculation versus evidence. That's the refrain in this case. Speculation versus evidence. The trooper testified that McKelligan told him the government theory was that Dr. Zazelle told Lindsay to say she heard voices. But when pressed, the trooper admitted that was just McKelligan's speculation. There was no report, no recording, no witness, just a theory. And the defense attorney, Kevin Reddington, is going to use that admission in his closing argument. He's going to ask the jury why prosecutors are coming up with theories based on speculation and then trying to find the facts to fit them. Because that's not how investigations are supposed to work. You're supposed to find the evidence and go wherever it leads you, not come up with a story and try to force the facts into it. But here's where it gets even more complicated. Before the killings, Lindsay Clancy was seeing a lot of mental health professionals. She was seeking help. She was trying to figure out what was going on. On December 2nd, she met with licensed mental health counselor Letitia Dukes. Her presenting concerns were anxiety, lack of sleep, depression symptoms, and frequent passive suicidal ideation. Thoughts of wanting to die, but no plan. And when Dukes conducted a mental status exam, she observed something strange. Lindsay was cheerful when discussing her anxiety symptoms. Cheerful. That's the gap between what she was saying and what she was feeling. She would tell her providers she was struggling, but then she would smile. She would talk about wanting to die, but then she would laugh. And when she was asked about her mood, she said she felt numb. She said she had no emotion, but she was cheerful. The defense says that's the mask. The prosecution says it's manipulation. Then there's the question of medication. Lindsay was prescribed multiple psychotropic drugs. She was taking Ativan for anxiety, but she told her providers she was worried she was becoming addicted. She was prescribed antidepressants, but the nurse practitioner, Rebecca Gelato, suspected she might actually have bipolar disorder. And if she was bipolar, those antidepressants could have made her worse. They could have triggered a manic episode. They could have pushed her over the edge. The defense is going to argue that she was misdiagnosed and mismedicated. They're going to point to the symptoms Gelato documented. Mania characterized by exaggerated excitement, hyperactivity, and racing thoughts. The lack of sleep without feeling tired. The compulsive exercise, running a 5K just weeks after giving birth, despite nobody wanting her to. The cleaning. The restlessness. All of it pointing to one thing: she was in a manic state, and nobody caught it in time. Here is the ticking clock moment. What happens when the people who were supposed to help you become the reason you're sitting in a courtroom accused of murder? What happens when the system fails so completely that a woman who was crying out for help ends up on trial for her life? The clock is ticking because the jury has to decide whether Lindsay Clancy is a victim or a villain. And the evidence is a puzzle with missing pieces. The door to the hospital room was closed. The phone call to her husband was made in private. The voices she mentioned may have been planted in her head by a psychiatrist trying to build a defense. Or they may have been real. The moral refrain is this: speculation versus evidence. Speculation versus evidence. Speculation versus evidence. That's the question that haunts this case. Did the prosecution build a case on a theory with no basis? Or did the defense fabricate a narrative to save their client? The trooper admitted it was speculation. He admitted there was no investigative basis for the claim that Dr. Zazelle told Lindsay to say she heard voices. That admission is going to be powerful in front of the jury, because it tells them that the government was willing to push a theory without evidence, that the investigation may have been compromised by bias, that the people who were supposed to find the truth were instead trying to make the facts fit their story. But the defense has its own problems, because the fact remains that Lindsay Clancy did this. She killed her children. She admitted it. And no amount of mental health treatment can change what happened on January 24th, 2023. The question is whether she was in control of her actions, whether she knew what she was doing was wrong, whether the mental illness was so severe that she couldn't stop herself. That's what the jury has to decide. Now let's talk about the public documents in this case. The trial testimony is a matter of public record. The cross-examination of Trooper Lawler, where he admitted the voices allegation was speculation, is available for anyone to read. The testimony of Letitia Dukes and Rebecca Gelato is public. The medical records, the treatment notes, the prescriptions, the symptoms they documented, all of it is evidence the jury will weigh. And you can find it too. The court filings are public. The transcripts are public. The evidence is there for anyone who wants to look. So here's the question we want you to take with you. If the prosecution was willing to push a theory based on speculation, what else might they have pushed? If the investigation was compromised, what other evidence might be tainted? And if the defense is arguing that Lindsay was failed by her providers, what does that say about the system that's supposed to protect us? How many other people are out there, struggling, crying for help, and falling through the cracks until it's too late? The file is public. The records are public. The testimony is public. And the answer to that question is somewhere in the evidence. What did Dr. Zazelle say to Lindsay in that hospital room? What did the prosecution know, and when did they know it? And why does the most important conversation in this case remain a mystery? We follow the facts so you can see the truth. If this story made you think, hit like, share this with someone who needs to see it, subscribe to Shadow Jury Archives, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next deep dive. Because the truth doesn't always come easy, but it always comes eventually.